Julia Appelskog, and I'm your host today. We're going to dive into pharmacovigilance in the UK following the Windsor Framework. My guest today is Jackie Roberts. She is Managing Director of PharmaGuard and located in the UK, so she will help us to dive through this legislation. So, Jackie, welcome, and please introduce yourself.
I'm the Managing Director of PharmaGuard Consultancy Limited, a consultancy that specialises in UK requirements for pharmacovigilance and regulatory affairs. I have been an EEA QPPV, I have been a UK QPPV, I have been a UK national contact person. So you're right, Julia, the Windsor Framework has really brought some significant changes to pharmacovigilance, and I think that's a key thing for companies to understand the categorization of their portfolios and the requirements that result because of that.
Perfect, thank you. Let's start to clarify the scope. Windsor Framework, we have the Great Britain and North Ireland no longer aligned when it's concerned to medicinal regulation. Can you explain a little bit?
Let's start by trying to explain what the UK actually is. The UK, United Kingdom, is actually formed of 4 countries. 3 make up Great Britain, that's England, Scotland and Wales, and then there's Northern Ireland as well. When the UK Brexited, left the EU, there were certain requirements put on Northern Ireland which were different from those in Great Britain to avoid a border between the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland. Originally, Ireland completely complied with the European legislation. Great Britain had the MHRA and UK legislation, and the Windsor Framework brought the two together in a way so that you now have UK licenses which cover Great Britain and Northern Ireland. But the difficult thing is there are still certain situations where you have to comply with European legislation, and this is where the categorization of the products, and you have to look at the product's history to understand that, becomes very important.
Yeah, tell me more about this. We see everywhere category 1 and category 2 products.
Yes.
So how to understand it? Please let me know.
Well, category 1, these are products that comply only to the MHRA, but these historically were those products that fell under the mandatory scope of the centralised procedure. So these were the original centralised products, or products that would have complied with the centralised procedure. They have to comply with the human medicines regulations, which are the MHRA rules. Everything else, and that is the majority of products, falls into the category 2 buckets. These do not fall under the scope of the centralised procedure, and they still have to comply with the EU legislation. So that's basically, you look at your portfolio, category 1 are those which fall under the scope of the centralised procedure, category 2 are the others. But even within that, there can be some differences, which I'm sure we'll get onto later. But basically, that's how you divide your portfolio, and the requirements for each of the 2 categories does differ.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. So we can start with the first question on the individual case safety reporting part. So how should company manage ICSR submission now when Great Britain and Northern Ireland follow the rules?
It's back now to the categories of products.
Okay.
So on products, there's no EMA reporting required if it's a UK only license. However, if you have a UK only license and a European license, then you do have requirements to submit some ICSRs to the EMA as well. So even though these are the UK only licenses, there are some situations where you'll have to report to Europe as well. Category 2, that falls under the scope of the European legislations. So you have to report your serious ICSRs within 15 days and non-serious ICSRs from Northern Ireland and the EU within 90 days. And the MHRA has actually been very helpful, and they produce quarterly lists of the category products. So the company shouldn't get confused. They can go to the MHRA, they can look up and be sure which category that their product falls within.
Okay, great. Then the next question, very close to my heart, is Pharmacovigilance System Master File, PSMF. So what are the current expectations for the UK PSMF versus the EU one, and if there is any changes in the future? Can we have one document? So
yes, you can have one document as long as your UK annexes would be really robust. Often it is easier to maintain a separate UK PSMF, a standalone document. You know, and you think about the way PSMFs are going with the different regions having slightly different rules. Companies could have a number of these, whether they'll go for a modular route, have a global one, and then different annexes per country. But companies, in my experience, are tending to have a standalone UK PSMF.
Okay, thank you. Then another topic that's very close to my heart is QPPV responsibilities.
Absolutely.
I'm leading the QPPV office, so please let me know what's the current requirement regarding UK QPPV and how does it differ from the QPPV location, where we are moving towards.
Okay, UK said they were leaving the EU with Brexit. Originally, the requirement was going to be a standalone UK QPPV that had to be based in the UK, and that's what countries were working towards. But when the legislation happened, the MHRA stated they still required a UK QPPV. However, this person could be the same as the QPPV and reside in Europe or the EEA. EEA is Europe. But so the MHRA does allow your European QPPV to also act as the UK QPPV. I don't think that Europe will accept it the other way around.
No.
So unfortunately, if you've got a QPPV in UK who resides in the UK, they cannot be your European QPPV, but the MHRA will accept it the other way around.
Yeah.
Now, the difference is if you do have a QPPV who's not residing or working in the UK, then you have to have this other role called a UK National Contact Person. And this person provides 24-hour contact for the agency, so their details are submitted. And their role is to act as an intermediary between the MHRA and the EEA QPPV. And they should have a dotted line reporting into the EEA QPPV. Often, unfortunately, this role can degenerate into more of a post box. Changes to the legislation can advise the EEA QPPV and the company they're working for on how these changes are going to impact on their portfolio and to help them ensure compliance against the UK legislation. So I would expect this role also to play an important part if there's inspections, audits, etc. But it can vary between companies. And certainly for me, from my perspective, the UK NCP should be an important strategic role for companies.
Okay, thank you. So if we look for the inspection, a very hot topic for many companies. So how the MHRA approaching inspection post-Windsor Framework for the...
Well, the MHRA generally operate under a risk-based approach. So they will inspect people based on, portfolio, if there's been organisational changes, if there's a for cause, there's a concern that they're worried about. But often now the MHRA is looking to how companies are meeting these obligations in terms of this UK PSMF, how the NCP or the UK QPPV interacts with Europe, and those points where things could fall between the cracks to make sure that all products are being handled in the appropriate fashion. But I would also say that, as always, the MHRA's inspection resources are quite stretched, so they are doing far more focused inspections.
Yeah. And together, my previous question on the PSMF and this one on the inspection, we have recently discussed in the conference that many companies has received a request to submit PSMF at the same time. So what does it mean when MHRA requests to submit PSMF, in your opinion?
It'd be a prelude to an inspection. And certainly the times I've been asked for it before, it has been a prelude to an inspection. But often now, because of their resource requirements and everything, it is, if you like, a part of their risk assessment. So they will look at this PSMF and on the basis of that, decide whether they will need to inspect. So I think companies were requested this as part of the risk-based approach, but I don't think every company that's been requested their PSMF will necessarily receive an inspection.
Okay, thank you. And then maybe a question regarding other functions. So of course the Windsor framework, it's not only PV issue. So
No.
how the function, regulatory, medical, quality, what are the major changes or the largest changes for this?
I think one of the big changes, which does impact across the company in many different functions, is the fact that the Falsified Medicines Directive is no longer valid in Northern Ireland. So obviously the UK stopped this and no longer has the requirements for FMD. Though I would say the MHRA haven't ruled out something similar in the future, but at the moment there's no requirements for the falsified medicines, the 2D barcodes, etc. And now that's not required in Northern Ireland either.
Okay.
And the UK Northern Ireland verification system, which was known as NMVS, I believe, has now been switched off. So this has impacted supply chain. This impacts regulatory because now it is a requirement that UK packs have UK only written on them. And this is to stop the movement of goods from the UK, which obviously is now outside of the EU, into the EU. So they have the UK only written on them. And that was a whole lot of work for regulatory. And obviously the QPs, the quality side's been involved in ensuring that the batches that are released meet these requirements. There was a transition phase, I think, up until this month. But from this month onwards, you have a sticker or something, you have to have UK only on your packs. I would say the MHRA, though, doesn't insist on products being recalled. So if, for instance, you've got stock on the market, but the stock was released before these requirements came in force, there's no requirement to recall these stocks. You can carry on marketing until the shelf life expires, though I know some countries can be a little bit different.
Interesting. Yes, and then maybe we can wrap up with some practical advice. What's your recommendation for the company, how to manage it more practically?
Right, one strong recommendation is familiarise yourself with the Windsor Framework Hub, which is a set of resources the MHRA produces online. They update it regularly, keep on top of that. And as I mentioned earlier, they do produce these category lists. And that's really important because understanding your portfolio and knowing whether your products are category 1 or category 2 is really important to understanding the flow of the pharmacovigilance information, be it ICSRs, be it PSURs, be it PAS. The different categories have different requirements. So my really strong advice is get on top of that categorization, know your portfolio, make sure you've got procedures that meet all the different requirements. You can have flow charts, decision trays, and go and get your processes audited to make sure you don't have gaps and things are falling through. It's much better if you do it yourself and wait for an inspector to come and do it for you. Okay, perfect. Yeah. And maybe some contact details where our listener can find you. How? Of course, yes. PharmaGuard, we do have our own website. So that's www.pharmaguard.co.uk. So please visit that. Or you can contact me via LinkedIn. I am available on LinkedIn, or info@pharmaguard.co.uk. Okay, perfect. Thank you very much, Jackie. Thank you, Julia.
No step too
Great
small,
insight, and I hope it really helps our listeners to understand the complex environment and
no
complex
patient
updates in the UK.
lost in a single word. We stay alert, we do our part. Safety for citizens, close to our heart. It's in our DNA, safety